What is shocking when we reported the book is how little process there actually was in the White House for that, because Biden had, and this is not different from the current occupant of the White House, but it is different from Trump in his first term, and it is different from Obama and other presidents. Biden had surrounded himself with loyalists who were basically yes men. He did not have people around him that could say no, or we need to have a process, or we really should think about this. He had removed systematically those people from his orbit.
Welcome. I am Marisa Lagos, and I am hosting tonight's Commonwealth Club World Affairs program. So glad you are all here. I'm correspondent at KQED. I cover politics. I also co-host the Political Breakdown podcast. Hopefully you've heard of it. It is now my pleasure to introduce Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson. They are co-authors of Original Sin, President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again. Jake Tapper is a best-selling author and award-winning journalist who's been covering the nation's capital for 20 years, and he is the CNN anchor of The Lead with Jake Tapper and State of the Union. He also serves as the network's chief Washington correspondent. Alex Thompson is a national political correspondent for Axios and a CNN contributor. He won the White House Correspondents Association's Award for Overall Excellence in Coverage for reporting on President Joe Biden in 2024. Jake and Alex, welcome.
Okay. Alex first.
Come on out. We decided if we all had a beer, this would feel more like salami and fun, right?
Nice,
so
yeah.
We'll do it. Well, I'm really excited to get into this with you guys. This book is quite a ride. I guess I would love to start off by asking why this book, and most importantly, why now, not say before the 2024 election?
It's a great question, and the answer is because our sources wouldn't talk to us until after the election. One of the ways that President Biden and his team justified everything that happened was to basically make this argument. One, Joe Biden is the only person that's ever beaten Donald Trump. Two, therefore, Joe Biden is the only one who can beat Donald Trump in 2024. These their arguments, not mine. And three, Donald Trump poses an existential threat to the United States of America. Therefore, everybody needs to get on board. And that was a very dominant, intimidating line of thought that allowed them to do a lot of things and allowed a lot of would-be detractors to be quiet and keep quiet. And when we pitched this book and started writing it the day after the election, we didn't know how many people were going to talk to us or not.
What was the pitch? Like how?
Oh,
the title.
This is exactly the pitch. Exactly that.
So you guys knew, I mean, obviously we all saw with our own eyes. And Alex, like you were in the White House, but like, I mean, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but it sounds like you didn't know who would talk, like at this point. But you had the sense that there was a story to tell, right? Because of what you had seen.
In all credit, Jake was the one that had the sense that there was more to this. Okay. And Jake obviously was a co-moderator of that, probably the most consequential presidential debate in American history. And so,
for all the wrong reasons, but yes.
Yeah, and so he approached me and was like, I think there's more here. And it was sort of a terrifying experience where we thought there was so much more to explore, that like the debate was not, as we've eventually concluded in the book, it was not a cold, it was not about over-preparing or under-preparing, it was not just a bad night, that there was something deeper going on and a frantic effort within the White House apparatus to conceal it from the American people, from the members of the Democratic Party, from members of his own staff. But it was sort of terrifying to be like, okay, so we're gonna write this. And I mean, so November 6th, we started doing it, no words written, no interviews done, no book deal. And Jake was like, we're turning the first draft in on January 31st. And
nothing like a deadline, right?
Well, I knew we had to, I was very determined that May was going to be when people would be ready to have this conversation. I just had a feeling. And,
that's a good point.
And I thought June would be too late, and that we couldn't do it before then. But it is true, when you say it like that, it occurs to me that we were letting our mouths write a check that it was possible our reporting was not going to be able to cash. But thankfully, we were. Thankfully, we
Oh, and
were.
I think actually it was worse than we even expected.
Yeah, we didn't.
Okay.
We didn't know that we were going to get more than 200 people, and we didn't know that they were going to be, even though many of them are on background or off the record in terms of their names. We didn't know that we were going to be able. We didn't know we were going to get as much as we got.
Yeah.
We were cutting stuff by the end of it to make the deadline, and because we could only be 85,000 words or less. But that said, I just knew that that was not the first time that Joe Biden showed up, on the debate stage. There's just no way.
I mean, were there people who you talked to that later said, no, you can't use my name, or were more forthcoming, kind of immediately than you expected? Because I feel like, to your point, right after the election, Democrats were licking their wounds. There was so much shock about Trump and the Republican sweep, on the left, that people kind of just hunkered down for a while, I feel like. But I also imagine that people probably started getting, maybe angrier about what they had seen.
Well, I think there were a lot of people that felt like they maybe should say something, during 2023, 2024. But basically, their calculation, their internal rationalization was, if I say anything, it's first of all, he's not going to listen to me, because really Biden only listened to 5 to 10 people in the White House. If I go public, he's also not going to listen, and it's only going to help Trump. And so I didn't say anything. And I think they felt angry with now being attached to this legacy of helping usher Trump back into office. And I think they also felt, they were thinking, not all of them, I would say the vast majority of them didn't express really any regrets for trying to be part of this effort to stop Trump from getting back to the Oval Office. But there were some people that were reflective and wondering if they should have done it differently.
Yeah. One of the things that struck me in this book is how you guys detail things happening before the 2020 election that were really troubling. And, you talk about as early as 2019 on the campaign trail, Biden struggling to remember Mike Donnellan's name.
Mike Donnellan, his longtime aide, had been with him since 1981. No aide closer to Biden for decades, and he's trying to come up with Mike Donnellan's name. Yeah.
So, when you look back at that, a lot of the book does focus on 2023 and 2024, and a lot of, I think, especially members of Congress really felt like there was a sharp decline there between, particularly pre-midterm and then. But, just talk a little bit about what the 2020 campaign was like for him, and what things in hindsight now seem maybe more troubling than they did at the time.
So our reporting, we didn't know what our reporting was going to reveal, but our reporting suggested that the very first time that top aides of his saw a real deterioration came after the tragic death of his son, Beau, in May 2015, when he was vice president. And I think that was probably part of the reason why President Obama was trying to discourage him from running, because he didn't think Biden was up for it. Now, that might just mean he's been through a devastating loss, what a horrible thing, or it might also mean maybe he thought that he lost something, a little something. One of Biden's top aides at the time told us it was watching Biden's psyche at that time was like watching somebody pour water onto sand, just a dissolving. And as we all know from grandparents, parents, friends, loved ones aging, having issues of health, it's not always just a straight line of decline.
No.
It's good days, bad days, good moments, bad moments. And, David Axelrod pops in on Biden in 2017, 2018, and it's like Biden has aged 10 years in that period. And the Robert Hur report, when the special counsel is investigating Biden's mishandling of classified information between the vice presidency and the presidency, he hears these tapes of Biden talking to his ghostwriter for a memoir, and Biden sounds very old, very addled.
Can't remember
names,
died.
can't remember dates. Well, that's the
actual
that's
interview.
the interview in 2023. But there are a lot of moments, and it does seem to us from our reporting that the most serious deterioration came in 2023, 2024. That's from top aides.
Yeah.
And because of the stresses, again, of a different son, this time Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden's plea deal fell apart in the summer of 2023, and Hunter Biden's trial and conviction on gun charges came in the summer of 2024, right before the debate. And what we realized through our reporting, and again, you think you know a story, and then you report it and it becomes your world for 4, 5, 6 months, and you're like, oh my God, now I see this. And I didn't see it clearly at the time. But Hunter Biden's, yes, he was worried about Hunter going to jail, but that wasn't what it was. He was worried, and Hunter was saying, Republicans are trying to drive me into relapse. Hunter obviously famously battles addiction. They're trying to send me into relapse. They're trying to get me to kill myself to get even with my dad, or to attack my dad. And so what was actually going through Joe Biden's mind, and I say this with all sympathy, the story is a tragedy. And I don't think this is a mean book. It's just a clear-eyed look at what happened. Joe Biden, who lost his daughter and wife in 1972 to a car accident and lost his son Beau to brain cancer in 2015, Joe Biden thought he was going to lose a third child. And that destroyed him. Yeah. And understandably so. And if it were just a private story, it would be one that everybody would just leave to, have him deal with it on his own. But it's not. It's one that affected all of us. And because of all that, foreign students don't get to study in the United States anymore, and cancer cures aren't going to be found, and all the rest.
Robert Hur is working for Harvard, apparently. I saw that.
Robert Hur is defending Harvard.
I mean, Alex, yeah.
I just want to add one more thing about the 2019-2020 primary. It's not like the Democratic Party was ignorant of the fact that Joe Biden was not the same Joe Biden of 2015, 2016. I mean, in fact, during the Democratic primary, other Democrats attacked Joe Biden for not being with it anymore. I mean, Cory Booker went on television on CNN and said, sometimes you look at Joe Biden and just wonder. And
they were doing their little tap dancing around it.
Yeah, exactly. No one wanted to go fully attack him, but it's not like they weren't whispering it off the record or shopping oppo on it.
Right.
But once he won the nomination, as the party consolidated in order to basically block Bernie Sanders, because they thought Bernie was going to hurt Democrats down ballot.
God forbid Democrats actually have a say in who they elect.
Right. When's the last time the Democratic Party trusted its voters?
2008.
2008, and it worked out pretty well. It worked out pretty well for them in 2008. But that was the last time, I would say, there was a truly open Democratic presidential primary process. Because 2012, obviously, Obama re-elect. 2016, the fix was in for Hillary. 2020, they all rallied around Biden after South Carolina. 2024, they were chasing people off the. I assume there's some Democrats in the room because we're at the San Francisco Commonwealth Club. You guys are allowed to have a primary and allowed to have your voices heard, whether it's Adam Schiff or Gavin Newsom or Nancy Pelosi you want to vote for. And if I were a Democrat, I'd be like, why don't they let us have a vote? Because last time it worked out pretty well. Obama, two-term Democratic president.
I think there are some people saying he should run again. Whole other story.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Just one thing on that. If Trump were to run a fourth time, which I don't think is really actually going to happen, the reason that won't happen is because then Obama will come out of retirement and
See?
I'm just saying that.
I think Obama might carry San Francisco.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves. That's up for the voters. That's up for the voters to decide.
Okay, that's oh gosh. Okay. But okay, so going back to the family dynamics.
Campaign headquarters right here for Obama. Obama 2028.
We got it.
We'll have to pass on your card to the Obama people.
So a lot of the way
Please run, Trump. I want Obama.
Michelle is coming out of retirement.
I mean Barack. Just to be clear, I mean Barack.
I know, but she doesn't want either of them.
Oh, no.
I think she might actually divorce him.
For sure. Yeah, she's like, I am not going back there.
Yeah, no. Well, she definitely wouldn't move to the White House, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So a lot of the book really details how tiny this circle was around Biden. And I want to talk about the staff first, but since we were just talking about his family, I think that's really important. I mean, it is not a mean book. Jill Biden does not come off well in it, though. She really, and I'm not saying it's your guys' fault, it's just the stories that people told you. But
told the truth.
But I mean, Alex, I guess a lot of what you see there is this expectation of fierce loyalty and an almost like willingness to ice people out if that wasn't seen. Is that something that you felt like you were aware of covering the White House, or again, or did some of this sort of come out as a surprise?
She doesn't come out well because of the end result. But I think if you give empathy to her, she saw herself as her husband's most loyal defender and the enforcer to make sure everyone around him was being as loyal as possible. So I think there was good intentions there.
Yeah.
But in 2021, so her chief of staff, Anthony Bernal, probably will go down in history as the most powerful chief of staff to a first lady in American history. I wrote a piece in 2021 about how Jill's enforcer has a mean streak. It was clear from the beginning that he was having, she was having, through him as a proxy, was having incredible influence over personnel throughout the administration, over presidential events, over the president's schedule. And basically, the way he was able to do that is he would go, if there was anything that upset them, they'd be like, the first lady won't like this. And that was a conversation ender, and essentially an implicit threat.
Right.
You really want to take this up to the first lady? Because everyone knew that the president would always take his wife's side.
And that is a good segue to the staff, Jake, because so much of what, especially when we come to the campaign and what he understood about polling and everything, but it seems like even in some policy areas, there was so much filtering by a very tiny group of folks, kind of led by Mike Donilon often on the political side, that almost it seems like you kind of question, does Biden have the whole story?
That's exactly right. As some cabinet secretaries put it to us, they would have to they couldn't brief the president, especially towards the end. After 2023, cabinet secretaries described it to us as weird. It was a weird situation. There was a cabinet meeting in October 2023, and they don't have another one for almost a year, which is odd, which is very odd. And the cabinet secretary said something like, we would provide information to the Politburo, is what Biden people called this small group of people. And then they would tell Biden the choice. But if they're shaping the choices and how it's presented, how much of a choice is it really? And a very simplistic way to say that would be if I told you to tell, let's do it the other way. If I told your husband to tell you, you can have anything you want for dinner, and your husband goes to you and says, you can have chicken or you can have fish. Okay, you got to make a decision.
Right.
But you didn't really have all the options on the table. So the Politburo was really steering a lot of the decision making. I mean, we were told that they would make decisions, economic decisions, without even talking to the Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen, which is rather shocking. And then, so where does this rear its head? Well, it rears its head in a lot of policy making decisions. And the most shocking one, or the one that surprised me the most, is Senator Michael Bennet from Colorado. Center left, centrist-y, good Democrat from Colorado, goes to the White House in June 2024 for an immigration event. And Biden has it's not a good Biden day. It's a non-functioning Biden day. And Biden is giving a speech, and he has kind of a glitch that neurologists told us looked like a neurological event. Very odd, very off-putting. You can Google it and find it. And Bennett leaves the White House. He also had a very small, short private meeting with the president as well. And he leaves the White House thinking, this is why our immigration policy is such a mess. The guy can't manage the portfolio.
Right.
And he's the president of the United States. He's not super engaged in this issue as it is. But whatever you think of how Trump, Obama, Bush, et cetera, handled immigration, they knew what they wanted and they directed it. And it's not an issue that Biden was really engaged in. And so,
even as it's one of his opponent's most potent political.
The most potent political issue. Well, look, the DHS secretary, the Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas, was expecting at the very beginning of the Biden administration to get an order to provide some border security. People don't really remember, maybe they do, this is a smart crowd, but Obama was called deporter-in-chief during his time as president. He didn't really get hammered as being weak on the border.
I mean, the left was mad at him too.
Yeah, the left was mad at him. Jorge Ramos called him deporter-in-chief, et cetera, et cetera. And Mayorkas thought that that was going to be Biden's position too, and the order never came down, and the border was, it was a mess.
Yeah.
It was a crisis.
Yeah.
Millions of people coming across the border, and I don't need to tell people in San Francisco that, it's a drain on resources, and even if you believe that we should have an open asylum program, like there wasn't a lot of order, and it wasn't a Biden position. It wasn't, Biden is a centrist. It wasn't a Biden-esque position.
Yeah. I mean, Alex, he did really engage, though, on foreign affairs,
Yeah.
particularly Ukraine. Seemed like he was
Really.
deeply involved in that. Talk about that, and did it almost feel like that was where he put what energy he had? And again, politically, I have to underscore that as important as that is not what polls were saying was important to Americans, right?
Basically, his former chief of staff, Ron Klain, essentially determined that in 2023, 2024, that Biden almost considered himself like the president of NATO rather than the president of the United States. That's how deeply he focused on Russia, Ukraine. And, he was 80, and he was an old 80. His energy was limited. We have months of private schedules. There was not a lot of within his private, beyond the public schedules of mostly 10 to 4, his private schedules, there was just not a lot of time. And he increasingly filled it focusing on the Russia-Ukraine war. And in some ways, this is speculation, but it is speculation from people that worked for the administration. Like some old people, sometimes you focus on areas where you are good, right? That you feel very confident on. Biden was the chair of the Foreign Relations Committee. He feels very comfortable with sort of European foreign policy. And, I think he saw himself as a sort of critical figure in that post-World War II order. But to your point, it came at the expense, according to people in the administration, of other priorities.
Yeah. So, part of, I think what's interesting about the book is there are things that were part of Biden's personality. He always had a quick temper. You talk about how maybe at times part of the shielding him from a bigger staff was you had to have speak Biden kind of to get in there. But it does seem like that stuff got sort of worse. And I just wonder, you talk about Biden mythology, this idea he talks about his dad, when you're kicked, you get back up. His belief that, no one else could beat Trump. How much of the actual decision to run again do you think kind of came from that part of his own personality and his own mythology?
I don't think there was ever a question that he was going to run again. I think this idea, this impression that we all had that he was only going to serve one term was a wink and a nod from his campaign, but never explicitly stated. We went back and we traced it. This is where it comes from. In December 2019, 4 different top Biden advisors leak to a reporter at Politico named Ryan Lizza, Biden. It's impossible to imagine him running for a second term. He's only going to do one term. This is December 2019, before the primaries and caucuses start. They know that Biden's age is a concern among voters, and so they want to get it out there. 4 anonymous people, and I talked to Ryan Lizza, and Ryan thought it was a strategic leak, meaning he didn't dig it up on his own. He wasn't asking people. 4 people called him and told him this is going to happen. He gets a good story in Politico, and it spreads, and we all think that. And then in March 2020, when the party is rallying around him so as to defeat Bernie, and he's doing an event in Michigan with Kamala Harris, Gretchen Whitmer, and Cory Booker, he uses the term bridge. He's going to be a bridge to the next generation as he stands there with a bunch of people in their 40s and 50s, they were all in their 50s at that point. And so that's the reason we have that impression. It was purposeful. But from the very beginning, I never doubted that he was going to run for re-election because he's a politician and he's a president, and I mean, I don't have to tell you guys, like, if you think that you can rule the world and that you should run for president because you are the human being that should be in charge of everything that happens in the world, you don't have a small ego, and you're not thinking like, it's probably time for me to like let somebody else have a chance. No, you think I am the indispensable man. I am the only one that has beat Donald Trump. I am the one that is standing against Vladimir Putin. I mean, this distinguishes him not at all from any president or anybody else who thinks they should be president. So I don't mean this to
Or
be...
even mayor or governor, I will say. Like, right, I mean, you have to have a certain amount of like hubris to think like, I am the best person for this job and then sell it to other people. I mean, it's...
So, I mean, I just think that there was never any chance that he wasn't going to run for re-election. But what is shocking when we reported the book is how little process there actually was in the White House for that, because Biden had, and this is not different from the current occupant of the White House, but it is different from Trump in his first term, and it is different from Obama and other presidents. Biden had surrounded himself with loyalists who were basically yes men. He did not have people around him that could say no, or we need to have a process, or we really should think about this. He had removed systematically those people from his orbit. He had a pollster named John Anzalone, who was with him as far back as when he ran for president in 1987 in Iowa, and he was plagiarizing the speech. You all remember that. Anzalone early on, he was his pollster in the 2020 campaign, but Anzalone early on was sending memos around internally in the White House saying, I'm worried about inflation, I'm worried about the border. Those memos leaked, not by him, somebody else leaked them, and we know this because that's the attribution in the New York Times when they got the memos. And Anzalone, who was, something of a detractor and a truth teller, was iced out. Yeah. And so when he comes and says to the White House, to Anita Dunn and Jen O'Malley Dillon, who are top officials of the Biden White House in early 2023, before Biden is officially announced, when are we going to start polling for this? When are we going to start discussing whether or not he should run so we can test it? This is the oldest person that has ever been president. And he looked it and sounded it. And he's told by Anita Dunn that we're not polling for this. The decision's been made. He's running. And there is no process. There's no meeting of all the top aides and advisors. Let's talk about, should we do this? It's, we're doing this.
Alex, did they think he could actually govern for 4 more years? Or did they even think about that? Like, was that part of any process?
I mean, the shocking part, actually, is how many people, senior people in the White House administration, did not believe he was capable of governing till January 2029. But basically, I think Jake has this expression where it's like, they didn't really think beyond November 5th.
Yeah, that was it. They just get him to election day.
Yeah.
And there's election day, we can figure it out.
But I think the book shows that the people around him were not willing to confront the reality of his decline. And some senior Biden people believed that if he had won, it would have eventually resulted in some sort of constitutional crisis, because the people around him were not willing to cede power and were not willing to acknowledge his diminishing faculties.
And they all had such little regard for the vice president.
Yes.
Also, so I don't know. I mean, I can't even imagine what would have happened if he had won and then he had some horrible moment, like what that team and his family were capable of in terms of hiding him. It could have been even worse. Like just to play that out, I don't know what they're capable of. They were capable of a lot of deceit. They were lying to you. I mean, forget me. I don't care. But I do care. But you are
on behalf of you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, presumably there are a lot of Biden voters in here, and he was lying to you. If you wrote a check to the Biden campaign, Mike Donilon was pocketing $4 million of it. Like, that's against you guys, not me. And I don't know what they were capable of doing.
You guys say that they discussed whether he was going to need a wheelchair and decided that they would wait until after the election, basically?
Absolutely. And, there was, starting in 2024, especially after Robert Hur's report, they basically been saying, his walk, the reason why his walk is off is because when he fractured his foot in 2020, he wouldn't wear the boot that often, and basically it didn't properly heal, and the insinuation was, he was undone by his own vigor. And
That's really what they said.
listen, you go and Google, and I know this because
Google it, undone by his own vigor.
Because it really frustrated me. A lot of reporters bought it. And
By the way, I was told that when I was interviewing one of the top sources or top White House officials who came in later, who came in 2023, and I think he believed it. I think he had been told it, and he believed it.
Yes.
Like, I think they weren't just saying it to the press; they were saying it to other people who didn't know.
But what was actually the truth, and this is because Biden's doctor, who by the way, said that the fracture had completely healed on schedule after 10 weeks of wearing the boot, but had told other people that the reason his walk was off was because his spine was degenerating at a rapid rate. And the reason, there were two concerns. One is, given his age and given that significant arthritis in his spine, if he fell one more time, he might need a wheelchair before the election. But even if he didn't fall, the doctor believed and warned, and other senior aides discussed, that he might need a wheelchair anyway, even if he didn't fall, because that's how significant his physical deterioration was.
And can I just say about the fracture? The fracture takes place after Election Day 2020, sometime in November or early
November,
December,
yeah.
And we still don't know how that happened. There's some.
They say he was playing with his dog.
Playing with his dog, which at that point
The vicious one?
Yeah, exactly. At that point,
The one who kept biting
one of
me.
the dogs was rather vicious, so it's possible. But but there was never a clear explanation from him as to what happened, and it's entirely possible. And again, I don't say this with any pleasure, but a lot of seniors fall down in the bathroom. It happens a lot. It's how Joe Lieberman died. It just happens. You don't have good balance. It's slippery, and we don't know what happened. And that should have been a kind of a cue at the very beginning. Now that I think about it, just live in front of all of you, they weren't honest about that or transparent about that at the very beginning. They were vague about it because he still seemed fine, mentally, and okay, he's wearing a boot, whatever, that happens. But honestly, we don't really know still. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things you all detail is the sort of quick and vicious response and kind of closing of ranks if anybody questioned this, whether it be in the media, whether it be, members of Congress or other folks. So is there a particular story you would point to in terms of why maybe people who saw things that were concerned didn't want to speak out in DC?
Sure. I mean, I sort of called their comm strategy for the nerds in the audience, these are not the droids you're looking for.
The Star Wars reference, which came out 30 years before he was born, but I appreciated
Hey, he still saw it.
I appreciated that he saw it.
And, he knew, and it was a correct reference.
Yes, well, yeah.
Listen, I saw the theatrical re-release in the 90s, okay? So,
that's not the real version.
yeah, Han shot first, we know. That's real deep
Han was
nerd.
the only one who shot.
All right. We're getting off track. But the White House's response, and honestly, it worked. I mean, it was a high risk, high reward strategy, which is basically we're going to deny reality, right? So anytime there was any coverage of his age, they would say, oh no, he's actually running circles around all of us. He exhausts all of us. He's as sharp as ever. He is the best Biden ever. You should just see him in the meetings. But then we'd be like, oh, can we come to the meetings? They're like, no. And, so.
The meetings which were only held between 10 and 4 p.m.
Yeah, I mean, but
they were great.
Yes, exactly.
Best meetings you've ever seen.
Yes.
They're still saying this, by the way. I mean, they still are saying he's as sharp as every decision he ever made was super sharp. And
what did that feel like covering the White House? Did you have any pause when you were thinking about how to frame stories or do things? Because you did know you were, I mean, I've covered governors and mayors. I know what that feels like when you have an administration kind of breathing down your neck on something. Was that something the press corps you think was acutely aware of?
Sure. I mean, White Houses are very adept at every White House regardless of party, will basically make you feel like, oh, you're not going to get access. Oh, we're going to like kick you out of the briefing. I mean, Jake felt this when he was like one of like, I mean, the toughest, but not in an adversarial, not in like a negative way, but just like a tough but adversarial reporter on Obama, when like a lot of sort of the DC, you know, like mediarati, for lack of a better term, like loved Obama,
Yeah.
right? And it wasn't, it was just like, that's the job, is like you do it. But you do feel, you know, if you're a reporter, a White House reporter in DC, and you are going to be really adversarial and tough, but fair on Trump, you get like snaps all across town. You get invited to like every single garden party and book party imaginable. But if you do it, you know, with Biden or even with Obama, like there is like a different social like cost, and I do think it affects the reporting.
I think
mean,
just to
yeah.
answer your question, so a couple examples would be Mike Scheer, who is a New York Times reporter. He's now in London. He covered Biden. He's been
an excellent reporter.
Excellent reporter. He'd been doing like the health. He's not a healthcare reporter, but he'd basically done 15, 20 years of, okay, let's get the health records of the president or the nominees and cover this. And he did one comparing Biden and Trump, and it was basically just about how neither of them were particularly transparent with their health records. And the White House comm shop, and this is not unusual, but the White House comm shop would, maybe it was the campaign, would like get people in social media and in politics and elsewhere to attack Mike, and like they would send around, and again, it's not a huge deal. Mike can take it. But Mike thought, and this is in the book, Mike thought this is an effort to make it so not only can we not cover this, but to even raise the subject will bring you unpleasantness. And it's
And it's already a hard subject to talk about,
Yeah,
right?
it's
Because we
very
want to be
difficult.
sensitive about people's ages and health and those sorts of things.
Of course. I don't need to tell Dianne Feinstein's former constituents that this can be a very sensitive issue to discuss.
Another
right?
person where the wagons were circled, and we got
Wagons
a lot
were
of pushback anytime we asked these questions.
Yeah.
You're being ageist,
Yeah.
right?
Ageist
Right.
and sexist.
Sexist, yeah.
I mean, and it's just, she was a trailblazer, but I think it's quite obvious that she served a term too long at the very least. And I mean, I remember interviewing her, and I remember it went from interview.
fast,
it went
too.
from, as happens, like it went from, just as somebody, like as an anchor, from 2013 to today, like it went from get her, she's a great interview, to she can't do morning interviews anymore, to she doesn't do interviews anymore, to what the hell is she doing? Like kind of stuff. Like, and that would just like, and you'd see it publicly, and there is a huge institution around her of aides and family members and lobbyists and whatever. And the Senate, which nobody defends other senators better than senators. And, you know, and it became a travesty, and you all were denied an actual U.S. senator for several years. And now imagine that times 1,000, and that's what you have with the president.
What's your sense of how much access Kamala Harris had to him and what she knew about his decline?
Well, at the time, she said she was in every meeting.
Right,
And
that's
was the
what I'm
last person
saying,
to
yeah.
talk to him on every major decision.
Right.
That was not true.
She also was not invited to the meetings where he was killing it.
sometimes, you know,
If there was a big meeting in the Situation Room or a big meeting in the Oval Office, she would often be there.
Yes.
No, I just was
Absolutely.
making a joke about you saying, I'll come to the meetings.
Yeah,
and they're
yeah,
like,
yeah.
no, you're not invited.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, listen, she may try to. She was not as present as she presented herself publicly. That being said, she did have a lot of access. Not only did she see him up close fairly frequently, she also, after the Robert Hur report, became like the tip of the spear in the defense. She used her experience as a prosecutor in this state and this city over, 15, 16, 20 years to try to smear Robert Hur, the special counsel, and say that he was basically a political hack and that Joe Biden was on top of it all.
Yeah.
Remind everybody why
Well,
Robert
let me tell you.
Hur-
So Robert Hur he was a former U.S. attorney for Maryland and was very respected. Yes, Republican, conservative credentials, but an American success story. His parents were Korean refugees from the Korean War. And, he came to this country, or his parents came to this country, and he and his sister were raised to believe in the American dream. He went to Harvard, and on and on. And it's just he's a public servant, the kind of person that other U.S. attorneys, other people in the legal world who are Democrats would say he is just straight and narrow, absolutely solid. When he was nominated to be special counsel, both of Maryland's very Democratic senators supported it, came out in favor of it, and he found himself in this situation. First of all, he agreed to do it. They didn't tell him.
It's a very senior official.
It's a great story. You should tell the full.
So he's called by somebody at the Justice Department. We need a special counsel. We think that the Attorney General is going to call for a special counsel investigation. And Robert Hur's like, who? And I said, it's a government official. So he and his wife talk about it, and he's like, well, I mean, I owe so much to the Justice Department.
He's at this lucrative law firm. We should say he's the hard work has paid off.
The hard work has paid off. He's representing the NFL. He's representing Meta. He's finally able to make money and provide for his wife and 3 kids. And and then they call him back. And so who is it again? It's a very senior government official. And he and his wife think it's okay, the Secretary of Interior got bumped up to first class and didn't pay for it or whatever. Anyway, he accepts the job, and so it's they found classified documents in President Biden's storage facility for during his period between the vice presidency and the presidency. And what is also going on at the time is that Trump is being investigated for his mishandling of classified information. So Attorney General Garland feels like, well, I've set up a special counsel for that, and we're investigating that. I have to be, very clean on this, and so we're going to do the same.
And Biden had publicly criticized
Trump. Biden had gone on 60 Minutes and really criticized Trump for his mishandling of classified information. So Attorney General Garland, who only came on to be Attorney General because Biden had promised him, you're going to have complete independence. We're going to restore the public's faith in how much, what's the word, integrity? Yeah, I mean, how much integrity the Justice Department has. A little brain fart myself there. And I'm only 56.
It's happening before our eyes now.
Impeach.
And impeach, right, exactly. So anyway, they bring him on, and one of the first things they do is they find out that he had these meetings with a ghostwriter for his memoir.
Right.
And they're listening in, and first the ghostwriter had deleted all the tapes once he found out there was a special counsel investigation. And then the FBI.
Not a good call.
No, not a good call. The FBI got them restored. And anyway, so here's Robert Hur, and he's listening in the basement in some secure facility, or not the basement, in some security facility in the FBI building or the Justice Department building. And he's listening to these tapes. And then all of a sudden he's hearing, and he hears Biden say, I just found all the classified stuff in the garage.
This is also how he sounds in the audiobook when he's reading Biden.
And Hur's like, what? And so anyway, it becomes clear that Joe Biden, whether you attribute it to malice or cluelessness or arrogance or whatever, Joe Biden has mishandled classified information during that period. Now, maybe you think that we overclassify things in this country, and I'm willing to have any one of those discussions, and I'd probably agree with you. But he has mishandled it. That's conclusion number 1 after this investigation. Conclusion number 2 is that there is absolutely no way that we can bring this before a jury. And you think, well, how does 1 and how does 2, how do they fit together? And it's because of 3. After listening to those tapes and after having 2 meetings constituting about 5 hours in October 2023, where Biden sounds like the Joe Biden we all saw on the debate stage, Robert Hur concludes, there is not a jury in the world that will convict him because he seems like a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. And he puts that in the report to explain he broke, basically it's like he broke the law, but I'm not going to prosecute him because no jury will convict him. Because on any jury, there will be one person that says, I'm not going to convict that guy. And don't forget, the trial wouldn't be until next year, 2026, So they drop this report. First of all, the FBI, the White House gets to look at it first to make sure there's nothing classified, no issues at all. The White House starts freaking out. They want that section, that well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory, removed. And they pressure the Attorney General in various ways to get him to remove it, and he won't. He won't remove it for any number of reasons. First and foremost, this is what a special counsel does. I'm not going to then change. I'm not going to edit. That's one. Two, like, you think I can edit that and like it's not going to come out that I edited? Like,
it's going to be worse.
What world are you on? Like, I mean, obviously, and also three, like the special counsel statute requires that if I do anything to interfere with that, I have to notify Congress. Like, it's just like,
and,
what?
And who's going to really love that story?
Yeah. So, I mean,
Jim Jordan.
Yeah. So, in any case, the Hur report comes out, and it is basically a bomb going off in Washington, D.C. One aide says to, well, tell the story about what you heard from the White House. He said the thing.
Yes. So basically, like once the Hur report came out, obviously the entire White House apparatus goes to war, not just with Robert Hur and trying to destroy his career, but they go to war with their own Justice Department. But there were some people in the White House, and one aide in particular confessed to me later, they were like, he said the thing. And once you say the thing, you can't take it back.
Yeah.
And there was this feeling among some people in the White House that they couldn't unsee. Like, you know, it shattered their image of Joe Biden. But they also felt that there was no room or availability for that conversation. Even though this was like 4 months before the debate, they could not have that conversation because the culture inside the White House basically meant that objection or concern meant disloyalty.
And the other thing is that night, Joe Biden comes out and gives comments to the press. And this is during a week, by the way, where Joe Biden has referred to President Macron as President Mitterrand. He has referred to Angela Merkel as Helmut Kohl. And then in these remarks, he says President Sisi of Egypt is the president of Mexico. So this is already during a period where people are like, I don't know what's going on, but something's going on. And he comes out and he says that Robert Hur, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically says that Robert Hur, because the Hur report says that Biden didn't know dates, including the date of the death of his own son, including the year that Beau Biden died. And Biden brings it up. He starts reading from like what sounded like a reasonable spin, which was like, look, they're not prosecuting me. He has a whole section in there about why what I did is so different than what Trump did, which is an often forgotten part of the Hur report, is Hur saying what Biden did is not even close to what Trump did, and they shouldn't be compared. When people call him a Republican hack, like Republicans thought he was a hack on the other side because of that. And but Biden starts, instead of just taking the W and saying, look, he's not prosecuting me, he said it's not anything close to that, and just dropping it. He's mad, he's angry, he's been fired up by his wife, he's been fired up by his son Hunter, who they're in a like fight back position. And he says, yeah, when he brought up that thing about my son, I thought like, who the hell are you to bring that up? Now, if you read the transcript, which doesn't get released for months, what was it, May?
2 months, yeah.
Yeah, or if you listen to the Hur report, which was kindly obtained by Alex the Friday before our Tuesday book release. Not planned, believe me, but because I was like, oh crap, what is this going to reveal?
Yeah, right. That's not what's wrong in the book.
Maybe he was totally with it and on top of it the entire time.
But what you find out is Robert Hur never brought up Beau dying. Robert Hur asked Joe Biden about the period in which he was sharing classified information inappropriately with his ghostwriter and others, which is 2017, 2018. And he asks about 2017, 2018, and Joe Biden says, now you have to remember around that time, my son Beau is either deployed or dying. And it's not true. Beau was deployed in 2008, 2009, and he died tragically in 2015. So, and then there's this whole conversation about, wait, when did Beau die? And like, he doesn't know. I'm not saying he doesn't care. Obviously, this is one of the worst things that ever happened in his life. He's devastating. But he's really old and addled and is not good with dates.
Yeah.
And so Robert Hur gets smeared as the heartless guy who's like quizzing him, quick, when did your son die? Which is not what happened at all. And he can't find a job for months.
Well, and you guys really detail, like it's her, but it's also Merrick Garland. I mean, this is a person who ran on a platform of restoring norms, of, respecting law enforcement, independent Justice Department. And maybe he didn't do anything as overtly as Trump, but I mean, you guys really point out that he often sought to undercut that independence and also, didn't really seem to respect it in the way. And as you pointed out earlier, had concerns about what could happen to his family, to Hunter, if he didn't remain in power.
Yeah.
Like, it's not unique to Trump, actually.
Yeah, Merrick Garland basically determined by the end of the presidency that despite all the things that Joe Biden said when he introduced him as his nominee to Attorney General about all those things you said about restoring trust and independence in the Justice Department, he may have said them, but he didn't believe them.
He didn't mean them.
Yeah.
He didn't mean them. He wanted, and in fact, when he pardoned Hunter, which I'm sure as parents we can all understand why he did that, but when he pardoned Hunter, he took a whack at the Justice Department. He called it a politically motivated investigation.
Not just Hunter, too. He preemptively pardoned his whole party, his whole family,
Yeah, the whole mishpacha got
Okay, we are running short on
I don't know what
time.
that
We
meant.
got to talk about the debate. Jake, you moderated. I have an audience question. Tell us how you felt sitting there with your fellow reporters watching the 2024 debate. Maybe Alex, you start that, and then we'll get to, because you were watching it. Jake was.
Jake has a more interesting story than me, given that he was 10 feet away. But I was in Atlanta. I was with all the other reporters in the spin room. And, it was all the reporters became as slack-jawed as Joe Biden as they were watching him. And they could, the amount of shock, and I think it was partly because, the White House had been deceiving them and been insisting that all these other moments you're seeing, there were plenty of deceptively edited videos trying to show Biden as an invalid, but that being said, there were, the White House was very successful in labeling every video as some sort of cheap fake or, part of a right-wing conspiracy. So there was a lot of, you could hear the keyboards going and the Slack pings going around. And,
I remember the moment when he pivoted. I can't remember what the question was about when he brought up the border.
It was about abortion.
About abortion.
Yes.
He was
And
given
I
the
was,
layup.
I
the
was
layup
covering
of
it from
abortion.
home, and I was watching it in my bedroom because,
He
our
didn't just
current
bring up. Let me just
president.
say, he didn't just bring up the border. He brought up the murder of Laken Riley.
Yes, and I was like, oh my gosh, what is happening? And my kids ran in and were like, what is happening? And I was like, I kind of had a Dana Bash moment. Was that the moment where she said?
He just lost. No, Dana wrote to me on a piece of paper. He just lost the election after that first. If you like it, you should buy the book. There's lots of little anecdotes like that throughout the book. Whoever was laughing at that in particular, but we're sitting there. He shuffles out. He looks every day.
Got there super late too, right?
Oh God. So first of all, let me just say. So the debate started at 9. I'm 56.
That's
so
late.
I am of the age where I love sleeping. And if I get into bed before 10, it's a great night. I have all sorts of ways to monitor my sleep. We can talk about this in some other evening.
That ring, yeah.
Yeah, I got the ring. I got 8 sleep.
I noticed
Anybody else here
that.
have 8 sleep? No?
No.
Oh.
I got like magnesium supplements.
Oh my
and stuff
God!
there,
I heard some
Yeah, let's move on.
some 8 sleepers. Yes. Yeah, you know. They'll all have it someday, but you know. Anyway, I'm walking out there. First of all, he got there super late. Both Biden and Trump were invited to come at like 3 and 4 for a 9 p.m. debate. And of course, no one's going to show up on time. I don't begrudge either one of them. But Trump shows up at like 5 or 6 and like does a walkthrough. And whatever you think of him, he knows television. So he's like, which one's my camera? Is the camera on me when I'm
That's
when Biden
really
speaks?
important
Yeah,
questions
like
to ask,
if I
though,
want to
yeah.
ask a follow-up, all that stuff. He's trying to figure it out. By 8 o'clock, Biden has still not shown up. And the debate's in an hour. We know that he's in Atlanta because we get the pool reports that Air Force One has landed, so we're not that afraid. But somebody from CNN calls his campaign or calls the White House and says, where is he? And is told by Anita Dunn, oh, he's fine. He's done a million of these. He doesn't, and the CNN executive says, you should just tell him to go. And just like, because we're in a studio, no audience, different cameras. Like, you just want to go and get your lay of the land. Anyway, he shows up at 8:32. He doesn't, I'm supposed to be out there, Dan and I are supposed to be out there sitting at the desk at 8:30. But we're not. And then finally, we don't even get out there till 10 of, which is late for like a pretty big event. So we're there. Anyway, he shuffles out, and he looks every day of his 81 years, and he sounds horrible. He obviously does have some sort of cold. And we start the debate, and the first answer is fine. I mean, he's shaky, but it's okay. It's serviceable. But somewhere in I think it's his second response. We're in the economy section. He just completely loses his train of thought. He's talking about child care and elder care and all the things that I want to do for people, and then he just completely loses what he's trying to say, where he's trying to say, where he's trying to go, and it's shocking and really uncomfortable. This is where he says we finally beat Medicare, and I say, and the time's up. I'm like, thank you, Mr. President, President Trump, and that is in the I don't remember minute by minute, but I know we had iPads so that we could write on them to communicate with the control room, because obviously you can't talk. They can say anything they want to you, but you can't say anything you want to them. And I wrote "Holy smokes," because I am normally a little bit more profane, but I didn't know who was back there. I didn't know who was back there. My mom might be there. I have no idea, David Zaslav, I have no idea. Somebody might be there, but holy smokes. I was just what is going on? This is insane. And Dana wrote on a piece of paper, he just lost the election. And it just got worse. And and it was not just one bad answer. It was not a cold, and it was not over preparation or under preparation. And it was not like Obama's bad debate where he just seemed like kind of a jerk. He did why am I here? He seemed unable to do the job, and it was just 90 excruciating minutes of that.
Yeah.
And then you're the topic of abortion for any Democrat. Right. You could probably hear Gavin Newsom getting off a car. Let me get in there.
Well, he was literally backstage waiting to be a surrogate. Yeah. I mean,
can we do ventriloquism?
Like a pitch hitter.
Yeah, just
coming for one question.
Donald Trump appointed the Supreme Court that overturned Roe v. Wade that said...
He just won on the midterms on that.
You don't have an answer. Joe Biden brings up the murder of Laken Riley. One of the most horrible things that has happened, and something that his opponent talks about all the time because it's emblematic of how bad Biden has been on the border in terms of border. Why are you bringing this up?
Yeah, I know.
There was... Anyway. As Biden would say. Anyway,
moving on. All right, well, I have a couple of questions about us as the media. Most observers of the Biden administration could see his decline. How did the mainstream legacy media ignore or overlook this consistent display of decline? Another person wants to know, I'm sure you'll be happy to give this up, Jake. What was being discussed behind closed doors at CNN throughout his presidency? Fox seems to attack this decline, but CNN remained silent. But I mean...
That's not... Let me just... I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The idea that we didn't cover what we all saw is not true. What we didn't cover was what we didn't see behind the scenes because we didn't know, because nobody was talking about it. And there were very few pieces of journalism that actually got into what was going on behind the scenes. In fact, even though Peter Baker wrote one for the New York Times about the travel schedule and how instead of one big trip to like Europe and the Middle East, they broke it up into 2 different trips. Alex was doing great pieces about any number of things, about how Biden no longer walked by himself to Marine One, the helicopter. He would walk with a group of people, the 10 to 4 schedule. Andy Linsky and Siobhan Hughes of the Wall Street Journal in June of 2024, before the debate, wrote a piece about like behind closed doors, Biden shows signs of slipping, et cetera. But with those exceptions, and I'm sure there's 1 or 2 else I'm forgetting, nobody was breaking news about what was going on behind the scenes. Yes, Fox was covering the clips that we all saw, and I'm not criticizing them for this. They were running them, they were questioning them, and absolutely appropriate. I was running them and questioning them, certainly not as much as Fox was, but we were doing it. But what we didn't know was how bad it was. And if we did, then the night of the debate would not have been the nuclear bomb that it was. If everybody knew, then that night would have been like, oh, okay, yeah, well, we expected he was going to do that. No, we didn't know that we knew he was old. We knew he was having bad moments. What we didn't know was that he was that addled, that he was having so many non-functioning moments.
The only thing, well, I just want to add one thing. I mean, this is why I feel like anyone that feels the media didn't do a good enough job, I think is very right in feeling that we
100%. I'm not disagreeing with that premise.
Yes, the White House was lying, was lying and everything else. And I just feel that, we should, the debate was a shock, in part because the White House was trying to hide him, but it was also a shock because we didn't do a good enough job.
Yeah, I agree with that.
What do you see any heroes here? like who do you think comes out well? I mean,
Robert Hur,
obviously, but I mean,
Annie and Siobhan from the Wall Street Journal.
But what
Dean
about
Phillips?
Dean Phillips. Okay.
Dean Phillips, who tried to get other Democrats to run for president against Biden because he saw what was going on behind the scenes and was willing to try to take action. Bill Daley, former Obama chief of staff, lives in Chicago, also tried to get Newsom, Whitmer, Andy Bashir, whatever to run. None of them would do it.
Right.
Understandably, also. I mean, there isn't a great track record of people challenging incumbent presidents and winning the primaries and not destroying their own careers in the process. But there are heroes, but not a lot. There are not a lot of people bathed in glory in this story.
No, I mean,
Alex is a hero. Alex was reporting this stuff, and Alex was reporting it. Yeah. And Alex was, I've been in that chair challenging Obama, not on stuff like this, like much less sensitive stuff, and that is a very lonely place to be if you feel like you're the only one doing it. And I'm sure it was awful.
well, and as you guys were talking about this too, it strikes me like even though you're very exposed as president, you're also very cloistered and protected and access. I mean, I did a brief stint with Kamala Harris's pool this summer and was like, wow, I would have gotten a better story if I had just come to this rally, as a member of the public,
100%.
right? Because you are waiting for their plane to get there, and then so being in the actual, especially the pool, is you're really, on some days just a stenographer, essentially, right? You're just reporting the remarks, and I wonder though, since we're in her hometown, how you both grade Nancy Pelosi, who I know Joe Biden is still very angry with.
She's such an interesting figure in this. I mean, not just Joe Biden, but Jill Biden, too. If you go back and listen to the View interview they recently did, both
where he said
together,
he could have won.
What?
Or where he said, I still could win or something, right?
Yeah. He still believes, and I think he will go to the end of his life believing he could have won. But Jill Biden had this little cross remark, which I just know from my reporting was almost certainly directed towards Nancy Pelosi, where she called her a so-called friend. And the thing is, I think what happened is in DC and a lot of industries and jobs in general, there's always sort of a tug of war between your own principles and like also what's good for your own boss, right? And what happened is that I think in part because the people around Biden have been with him for so long, and also because of their own belief in him, that they cared more about him than they cared about the party, than the White House and the country. Nancy Pelosi, despite her very sincere affection for Joe Biden, cared more about the party and the larger mission. And that's why she, basically gave space. Like she put herself out there and gave the rest of the Democratic Party space to pressure him out.
Right. I mean,
after the debate. After the debate. Yeah, I mean, I think Pelosi, in the relative world of Washington courage, after the debate, did some, I don't know if heroic is the right word, but she did some brave things. She knew that she was taking some risks. And she knew that she was taking some risks because she had an ability to do so in a way that other members of Congress, other Democrats didn't, because she, doesn't have to worry about her livelihood. She's at the end of her career, et cetera. But she would say things that, were shocking for people to hear. She said and it was all after the debate. And in her defense, I will say that after she stepped down as Democratic leader, after the midterms, I don't know that she got a lot of time with Joe Biden.
And she was trying to give, I think, Jeffrey space.
She was trying to give Jeffrey space to be the leader of the Democrats, but she wasn't.
In meetings all the time.
She wasn't. There were not a lot of Democrats that saw him. House Democrats or Senate Democrats that saw him a lot in 2023.
Right.
There are any number of reasons for it, but one of the reasons is they were hiding him. But she, one of the first things she said was, well, we don't know, after the debate, we don't know if this was an episode or a condition, which is just like, what did she just say? And then she went on Morning Joe, and Biden had made it clear he was in the race, he was staying in the race. He'd written a very fierce letter to House Democrats saying he's staying in it.
So retro, the letters.
Mike Donilon had written, and Joe had signed his name.
Auto pen.
Yeah, and Nancy Pelosi said, well, we're just trying to give the president, on Morning Joe, we're just trying to give the president space to make his decision. And the White House was like, what?
And that's also Biden's favorite show, right? That's when they knew he would see it. Okay, we only have 2 minutes left, but we are also in San Francisco, Kamala Harris's hometown. She may be running for governor. I guess, what do you think she'll run? And do you think that what we're talking about here is going to be, I don't know, something she'll have to answer for?
I think she'll definitely have to answer for it, whether or not voters care, and we just don't know. Yeah. She was in the room enough. She also was a public validator of Biden's competence and fitness for the office. So she'll definitely have to answer it. I do think she probably will run for governor. I think Democrats, at least the ones I talk to, are so frustrated with losing that they will be, again, sort of focusing on electability.
You have to really try to lose the governorship in California as a Democrat.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I meant for 2028. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I think
he's from California. He knows.
Yeah. So my point was that I think because 2028 as a presidential candidate, she would have a more uphill battle. I think she'll probably lean toward the gubernatorial race.
I think it's a stronger. She will be, if she wants to be president, she will have a stronger position if she's running as governor and she's had a year of governing under her belt. But I don't know what she's capable of doing, and I assume that a lot of decisions are being made right now based on polling and fundraising activities.
Do you think they're listening to the polling this time?
I think that she was always listening to the polling. The problem was that, as you know from reading the book, it wasn't just that the Politburo was hiding Biden from the world. They were also hiding the world from Biden.
Yeah.
And the pollsters would come up with these polls and give them to Donilon, and he would massage them so that they weren't recognizable, and take a mound of excrement and turn it into Venus de Milo and say this is how your polls look, dear leader. But I don't look. The last time. I'm glad you like that. The last time that Kamala Harris was asked, Vice President Harris was asked about Biden that I know of, publicly, was Hallie Jackson from NBC asked her about, about that night, and like, can you say that you have been honest with the American people about you've been vouching for him? And look, at this point, we all know the truth, right? We all know the truth. Whatever you think of Joe Biden, obviously his deterioration was such that he was not able to successfully run for president effectively in 2024, and probably could not serve as you would want a president to serve starting in 2023, 2024. I mean, that's just the facts as we present them in this book based on interviews with more than 200 people. Kamala Harris, asked about this, said, Hallie, it was a bad debate. If it was just a bad debate, you wouldn't be the nominee, right? That's just a fact.
Yep.
And I don't know what Democrats, Alex and I talk about this all the time because we're waiting to see how people will react to this book in terms of the reporting, which I think is fairly solid and has been acknowledged as fairly solid by the normal people in the world. And we see Villaraigosa bringing it up on the campaign trail, so I don't think that she's going to be able to escape it. But I don't know if they're going to try to, like, January, the way that the Republicans dealt with January 6th, like that did what? I don't even, who? What date? And I think there's going to be an attempt. They are politicians.
They are politicians. We will leave it there. Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson are co-authors of Original Sin.
Can we get some applause for her?
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you. I want to remind everybody, you can pick up a copy of the book here or at your local bookstore, and you can find more information about membership and upcoming programs at commonwealthclub.org. I'm Marisa Lagos. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.